a Midnight Waffles podcast.
This is BattleStations, a podcast about the Columbus Destroyers and the Arena Football League. I'm Frank Walker. All right, and here on the BattleStations podcast, we've got Coach Matt Sauk here with the of the Columbus Destroyers. How you doing this evening, Coach?
Good. I'm doing great, actually. How you doing?
I'm doing real well, thanks. It's exciting to get to talk to you. It's exciting that we're this close to the season and the return of arena football to Columbus.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, it's so we got like 36 days to camp. I got to fill about 35 contract guys and about 5 more waiver guys into camp. And then we got an open workout starting this month. Later this month, they'll be announced probably early next week. And, hopefully we can sign a couple guys out of that. So it's crazy the amount of stuff that goes on when you open a franchise. There's just so much stuff that you have to do, not only as a coaching staff, but as a front office to get, the season ready for everyone.
Yeah, it's crazy to think you're right. I mean, it's 50 days, I think, from the day it was announced, or 55, or it wasn't a lot of time there.
Yeah, in reality, you're kind of just going off of when I was announced, because that's really when, you're starting the recruiting process is at that point. So yeah, it's sooner than I've ever had to get a team together, but I love the challenge and I'm excited about it.
Yeah, and that is one of the first things I want to talk to you about. I mean, it's kind of unique. We're in a situation where every player who played last year is a free agent. Apart from that, maybe you're drawing on a different talent base here in Ohio who hadn't really, when there were Arena League teams further east, they weren't jumping into it yet. From the process on your end, I mean, what kind of scouting do you do? Are you watching Arena League games from last year? Are you trying to find guys who maybe you think are still trying to fight their way into the NFL and trying to find old tape of them? How does that scouting process go for you at this point in the phase of where we are?
Yeah, I mean, it's everything. You got to really look everywhere. My personnel guy is sending me a list of people that I need to watch film on, contact, call, text, whatever. I mean, any way, shape possible to get a hold of these people and deal with them. Right now we can't talk to anyone that played last season. So we can't do that until the 4th of March when that opens free agency. And at that point we can talk to them. I've got a couple guys that didn't play last year who are kind of just sitting out there. So, those are the guys that I'm trying to get back in, whether they have, the link from, the teams I've coached. But, I can't even tell you how many people I've called at this point. You're probably on the phone for about 8 to 10 hours a day, just talking to them, talking to agents, just trying to convince them that Columbus is a good situation. And which I honestly believe is a great situation. Not a good situation. I believe that this will be a great situation. Just coming from the fans, the arena, the organization. I mean, everything is top notch so far. And I've been with a lot of teams, and I've seen a lot of ownerships. I've seen a lot of front office people. And right now, this is, to me, the best run front office I've ever been a part of.
Well, I think that was definitely evident a few days ago. I remember you tweeting something about you'd seen the practice facility and it was kind of top notch. I mean, in your history, what kind of practice facilities have you seen for AFL or indoor football kind of teams trying to run things?
I've seen good to just like, wow, not good. So, if I were to rank the one that we're looking at and trying to get a deal with, this would probably be a top 3 for me, and that's including the old AFL. This facility has got everything we could ever want, and it would be a crown jewel in the Arena League. It's just a good spot. But yeah, I mean, it's just it's hard because again, arena football is played indoors, and you can't really practice outdoors in the middle of winter and expect to do anything, good in the inside of an arena because it doesn't really simulate the conditions. So, most teams will go into indoor soccer facilities and do it that way. But yeah, the place that I'm hoping we're going to get is without a doubt, it's a 5-star. I mean, it's fantastic.
All right, that's definitely exciting there. So the big news that kind of came out today was rounding out more of the coaching staff there. The announcement's Clay Harrell being brought on as the defensive coordinator and line coach.
Yep.
And Stanley Frank's coming on as special teams coordinator and defensive backs. What was it that you saw in them or that you see in assistants in general that make you say, yeah, that's the kind of guy I want talking to my players on the bench or in practices? What is it you saw in them that made you know these were the right guys?
Well, I've worked with Clay before. He played for me in 2010 with the Spokane Shock. I knew what type of person. He was the type of player that would do anything, play hurt. He was that guy. And, I just knew him as a person that he was going to have my back. And that to me is you need loyalty as a coaching staff. And so, he kind of went with me in Portland as my O-line, D-line coach. I think he's had enough experience now to where when I talk to him or, we're breaking down film, I think he understands what offenses are trying to do. And that's the main reason why, I made him my defensive coordinator. I felt like he had a good grasp of how to stop people, what to look for on film. But, like I said, it's a good match because we have the same philosophy in how we recruit, the type of players we're looking for, the type of defense we want to run. And that's kind of the same thing with Stanley. Stanley, this is new to me. I met him 3 weeks ago. We talked on the phone for about an hour, just really talking about, what his philosophy is, how he teaches. And to me, it was an immediate connection. And that's important to me is that we see the same thing. And, we don't always have to agree on it, but, overall, our philosophy is the same. And that's, to me, that's important because I don't mind having arguments as a staff. To me, I find that healthy. I think you should disagree with someone. You shouldn't always agree with someone because I don't think that you get to see, other sides of the coin kind of thing if you just all kind of agree. So, I like the fact that, I think these guys will come up with some ideas. And as long as they, argue and they argue it well, I'm all for it. And that's what's important. I may not agree with it sometimes, but if they have a good reason for it and they can prove it, then I'm all for it.
All right. And going even a step back from there, from hiring your staff and everything, how originally did you get kind of plugged into the Destroyers, or how did you hear this was going on, or did you get recruited, or what's the story behind you coming to the team there? I know you mentioned the 4-hour interview during your press conference there, but how did that process go from your side of things?
It was crazy. I mean, it was one of those things where, someone I know in the league kind of asked if I was interested. And, I kind of, we have 2 businesses that we run and, they're on solid ground right now. We opened a coffee shop and, it's been open for about a year and about 9 months now. And, if you asked me like 6 months ago if I could come and coach, I would say no because, we were just still dealing with the coffee shop and getting a good group of employees. But, it just happened to be it was just the weirdest thing where, he came, he asked me if I was interested. I said, yeah. He got in hold of Jeff, let him know. And, Jeff did his background check on me. And, I just feel like we really hit it off on that first interview. And, it was a surprise. It really was. I didn't think I would get it just because I'd been out of the league for a year and a half. But for whatever reason, Jeff and I just really I felt like had a good. We had the same ideas, we had the same feelings on how to run a franchise and and do stuff like that. So it was a crazy time. I mean, literally within a week. You go from doing the first interview and then you do 2 more and, you just have those conversations and, you send them all your information, what your philosophy is, what, what kind of players you had in the past, playbooks, stuff like that. And like I said, after that first interview, I just felt like I had a good connection with him.
It's crazy how quickly you go from what it sounds like from the interviews to standing at a press conference in the middle of Nationwide Arena.
Yeah,
having to talk about the Michigan hat and all that good stuff. So
I mean, a week and a half. So I think it was like a week and a half. It was really fast, but it was cool. I mean, it was just one of those cool experiences that you kind of just you do, and then the press conference was awesome. I mean, you got confetti flying. Me just happening to have that Michigan. I mean, literally joined like 2 days before, and I didn't really think about it, but it is what it is. People are crazy. It would be like if I went to Michigan and had an Ohio State hat. They'd had the same reaction, and that's what I love about it. It's just the passion that they have here in Ohio and basically that Midwest.
Well, I will say from my perspective, Coach, if you're from Michigan, there's no shame in wearing a Michigan hat. From my perspective, that's from somebody born and raised in Ohio. I wouldn't expect any different.
Yeah, I mean, no, don't get me wrong. Now, I mean, I still have my gear, and but when it's in season in Columbus, I'm a Columbus Destroyers guy, and that's all that matters. And I'm all for Ohio, but when Michigan plays Ohio State, I'll keep that private.
You know what? It's not a bad deal to have on that. And one thing I will say to you is just a heads up on the way over here. One of the fan bases you'll get, there is a large fan community in Columbus that they're transplants. They're not from Columbus.
Oh, it's good, yeah.
And they love rooting for sports, but they're just not that into Ohio State. So things like the Destroyers or the Blue Jackets and the Crew are huge for them. So,
well, that's awesome.
Yeah, so I think you'll have a strong home with them too. The Nomads who've made it here.
Nice.
Now, something I did want to ask about, because I started noticing that while I was looking at you and looking at the rest of the league and everything else. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but at this point, it seems like 3 of the 6 coaches in the AFL, yourself, Ron James, who's the head coach of Atlantic City, and Rob Keefe from Albany, you all work together in Salt Lake City, right?
Yeah, and I think I actually posted that on Twitter before the press conference. Yeah, it's pretty amazing to see that happen. And I worked for Ron for 3 years, and he's just he's a great guy to be around. He lets you do what you need to do. He obviously has a say, but yeah, he was an absolute great person to work for.
All right, and when you're going to be going up against these teams, so Atlantic City and Albany, I mean that's nearly half the games there.
Yeah.
Is there anything different you have to do going into preparation, knowing you're going up against guys who you've worked with and strategized with and all that?
Well, yeah, I mean they probably still have my playbooks, because I was with Keefe in Orlando. So, the goal is to change things up a little bit. It's arena football. It's 3-on-3 basically when you got a wide receiver and 3 wide receivers against 3 DBs. You want to change up your tendencies. So, when I watch film, which I've already started, I'll look at our film in 2016 and see if there's any tendencies that I need to break where they can look at, because I'm sure that's what, that's how AC and that's how Albany is going to, get ready for their game against us, is to look at previous film. And, Rob's a good defense coach. He's going to understand what's going on. But yeah, my biggest thing is to make sure that I try to break any tendency I had in 2016.
All right, and let me ask, as football fans, from the last time arena football is in Columbus, it's been a while now, and there's been a lot of changes in how fans interact with the sport. As far as I think there's multiple people online anymore who just make YouTube videos doing film breakdowns of like NFL games and whatnot.
Yeah.
If there was someone who was watching the game that way, trying to look for the strategy, look for things like that, is there anything you would tell them when they're watching an AFL game to kind of keep an eye out for that's different from outdoor football? I mean, obviously it's a much smaller field, fewer players. I mean, do they see zones work differently, or what kind of things would you say to them?
I would say the biggest difference, I think the biggest thing I think people question, to be honest, is the jack. They just see that guy standing there and they don't really understand what he can do. And I think most broadcasts really have to kind of explain, like, why can't this guy go past 5 yards, or why can't this guy rush, and stuff like that. And that to me is a unique rule in our league that I think will be modernized a little bit, where he'll have a little bit more freedom probably in the next year or two. But the game is football, and the difference between outdoor and indoor is the smaller field, obviously, but you can't do as much coverage wise. And you have more man on man than any other league. And again, we got that one guy going in motion, and he's got basically a 10-yard start to get up to his max speed. He's hitting the line at max speed. So it is a little bit different that way. Rookies tend to struggle with that motion. But yeah, I think it's a unique game that has unique rules. And sometimes it can be a little bit hard, I think, on fans to kind of figure it out. But to me, it's like, even if you don't know exactly what's going on, it's still a fun game. It's still something fun to watch. And that to me is the cool thing. Like, there's like two sports that I like watching. It's hockey and arena football. Like, I can go into a stands and I like watching those two because there's always action. Like, there's always something going on. And that to me is the great thing about arena football.
Like hockey too. I'm liking you more and more, Coach.
Well, I mean, you go to hockey. It's like there's always, you're moving. Like, there's constant movement, and there's constant strategy in how they're attacking, how they're defending, and I mean, it's just one of those things. Like, to me, it's like I need to see action all the time. And when you watch the NFL, now don't get me, I love watching the NFL too, but it's just, you got to play, and then you got 30-second break. I mean, I think they broke it down for like a 4-hour game. I think it was like 20 minutes or something of it is like actual football plays. And that to me is crazy when you think of it.
Yeah, the AFL is definitely not that.
No.
And one other thing I wanted to ask you tonight, it was just kind of a thing I heard somewhere else and popped into my head on the some fans, and I think it was actually the podcast from Albany. They were throwing out the pie in the sky idea because Antonio Brown's father had played for the Albany Firebirds years and years ago. Yeah. They were throwing out this idea, and they're like, it's not going to happen, but what if we could convince him to come and play for the Empire for one season? And they were saying things like, obviously money can't be a factor here or whatnot, but and they were saying, he could come in, spend 1 year, break all the records. And I started thinking, I honestly don't know if he would break all the records right away. So, I mean, what do you think would happen as someone who's both coached and seen high-end football players and played at high-end college football and everything? If you were to just pluck someone from the NFL or like a major program like Alabama, Ohio State, something like that, and just threw them on an NFL or an AFL field right into a game, what do you think would? I mean, even if they know the rules, what do you think would surprise them the most?
The speed of the game. And just how fluid and how quick it is. I mean, that's you compress the field in half, and you almost turn it into an NFL game speed type thing. But I've seen hundreds and hundreds of guys who've made it in the NFL, and they've come into the Arena League, and from getting cut from the NFL, and they come to the Arena League, and they can't do it. It's just not for everyone. It's different. And, just because someone went to an NFL camp or they played 3 years in the NFL or, 5 years in the CFL, they should never have the attitude that they could come in and just produce, because a lot of them don't. A lot of them fail. It's a hard game to learn. There's a lot of small things that you have to perfect. And again, it's really just being able to be a player in a small area. And that to me is the coolest thing about the game is just that fact. And, like I said, lineman is a little bit different. If you got like a great D lineman who can pass rush, that's a little bit different. But if you're a wide receiver or DB, it's complete. It's not even close to the outdoor game. Just the speed you get, the walls itself. So it is a unique game, and not every player can do it. And that's the reason why you see, a lot of guys who maybe were in the NFL or CFL they just can't do it because they just don't maybe have the body type or they just can't adjust.
Well, Coach, we do want to thank you for being on the show. This was awesome. I really enjoyed it. Felt like I learned some things about the game and just kind of what to expect going into this season. So thank you very much for your time.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me on.
Well, since that interview with Coach Sauk on Friday night, a lot's changed for the Columbus Destroyers. There are now 12 players on the roster, 12 free agents they have signed since the beginning of since Monday's opening of free agency for the Arena Football League, and there's some exciting names on the list. Now, the thing about arena football, I mean, it's we're talking about a level, obviously not in the NFL or anything. So a lot of these guys aren't players you've heard about all the time, or I mean, some of them you might remember from here or there in college and different things, but a lot of these guys have been kind of turning out pretty amazing careers in arena football. The first player that was a Columbus Destroyer, defensive back Varmasani, who, when I was listening to the State of the Empire podcast the Albany Empire puts out, they seemed kind of dejected that they'd lost him. And when you look at his career stats, you kind of get a sense of what he is. They referenced him playing kind of middle defensive back. For those of you who aren't aware of how when the Arena Football League lines up, if you haven't watched a game yet, I mean, 8 players on each side of the field. What you tend to see out of defenses is the 3 linemen, 2 linebackers, and then the 3 defensive backs in the back, and they're kind of referred to as left, right, and middle defensive back based on how they read the field. Now, out of that, they can play man, they can play zone, they can play all sorts of things. But letting you know what numbers we're seeing out of Varmasani. He was part of a solid defense in Albany last year. He has played 5 seasons of Arena League football. Started in Portland, so I don't know if there was overlap with Coach Sauk there, but then he played in Orlando. I believe there must have been in some of those, because I know Coach Sauk, in the interview, he talked about coaching all in Portland and Orlando and everything else. But he spent some time in Baltimore, and then last season in Albany. He's the first player we've added, defensive depth there, and Coach Sauk has talked about, and I forget if it was in that specific interview or not, but he has talked about how the team, he plans on building it down the middle in terms of, center, quarterback, linebackers, that sort of thing, as far as how he thinks you build the team out. Now, that makes the next signing kind of interesting, but pretty awesome. The Columbus Destroyers signed wide receiver Donovan Morgan, known lovingly throughout the league as Captain Morgan. Just a great wide receiver in arena football, which something that it might not translate to the front of your mind is, in arena football there's a lot more scoring, but the yards don't tend to be as impressive because you've only got a 50-yard field. So you can score a bunch of touchdowns without having to actually cover a bunch of yards. Well, Donovan Morgan in 2015 had 2,000 receiving yards with the Los Angeles Kiss, which is pretty incredible when you think about it. Now, he actually went into kind of a retirement in the league. He has not played in a couple of seasons, and this is him coming back. He has come back to play in the Arena Football League, and it'll be with the Columbus Destroyers, which is awesome. He is granted, he's, had a couple years out of the league, but let's see, maybe that allowed him to rest up. There's a lot of excitement around him coming back. I mean, his last season in the league, he went from that 2,000-yard season all the way down to 1,400, which is still amazing. And his touchdown total dropped only from 44 to 41 in that final season. The amazing thing about Donovan Morgan is he is going to hit some milestones with the Destroyers here. His career receptions are at 907, which when you look at his average year, he's normally over 100, 120 receptions. So he'll probably hit 1,000 career receptions this season. He's at 12,732 total yards, so he's probably going to hit 13,000 yards. I'd be shocked if he didn't. And he's at 290 receiving touchdowns, so 300 touchdowns he'd probably hit for a career this season. So there'll be some exciting moments to keep an eye open for him there. And if you were watching on Twitter as these signings unfolded, something you noticed real quickly about the Destroyers was that defensive line was getting loaded up real quick. And I don't know if this may be the philosophy Coach Matt Sauk has for that defense as far as building down the middle. The idea that if he can get a pass rush going, if you can try and minimize the time a quarterback has to throw, that may be your best weapon in a lot of situations. So, signed defensive lineman Kareem Smith, who played with Washington last year, has played a few seasons so far in the Arena Football League there. 8 seasons so far. So this will be his 9th season in the Arena Football League. So I have him on the defensive line. Defensive lineman Derek Summers, who has also played 8 years in the Arena Football League. Most recently last year with Albany. He had 13 tackles last year. And the thing, again, to remember about defensive linemen in the Arena Football League is a lot of it's about creating pressure. There were years he had sacks at 10 and 12 sacks, and there's years where he didn't have as many sacks, and it's about creating that pressure and how quickly the quarterbacks are going to get the ball off. But trying to create that pressure so that when they throw the ball, it's off target, that sort of thing. Terrence Taylor, another defensive lineman, he's played been a long time Arena Football League player, played the last 2 seasons in Baltimore. Before that, played in Orlando, played in Spokane, played in Pittsburgh before that. So he's been a long-time player in the league. So, again, more strong defensive lineman there. At that point, we start to get into guys who have less productive Arena Football League seasons. Wide receiver Julius Gregory, who played 3 seasons of Arena Football, most recently in 2017 with Washington, where he had 11 receptions for 101 yards, a touchdown. So with 1 touchdown in the Arena League or 11 receptions, that's not a lot. Now, in 2015, he had a 98 reception year for 1,036 yards and 27 touchdowns with the Tampa Bay Storm. So maybe he's looking to get back to form there. Didn't play last season in the Arena Football League, so we'll see. Maybe he's kind of building back up there in what he's doing. A wide receiver by the name of Stephen Clark, who, if I found the right guy, now again, folks, as we understand, sometimes we're getting into guys who aren't as well known, and so they don't have huge stat pages or anything else. He played, he's a defensive back, my goodness, out of Vanderbilt. Spent some time with the practice squad for the Miami Dolphins, has played with the BC Lions for a few seasons now, and looks like he's going to try and take a crack through the Arena Football League. Did his college career at Vanderbilt there. So, again, a lot of these guys we don't know a lot about. And so that's part of what's going to make it interesting. And part of it is, the roster's not done. With the amount of guys we're looking at, 12 guys, I think we're roughly halfway done as far as the roster being built. And there's going to be the open tryout, which, to my understanding, is going to be about just trying to fill in a few extra guys to kind of have the best roster you can. Because I think there's an expectation throughout the Arena Football League. When you have a year where everyone's a free agent going into the league, but you have to expand by 2 teams, I think every team expects that, okay, everybody who played last year, a lot of those guys are going to get contracts this year, but obviously there's still going to be probably 5 or 6 spots a team that need filled up somewhere. So that's where some of the guys we mentioned that didn't play a lot or that maybe have been out of the league for a year or 2, that's where they're plugging some holes. Now, the one quarterback that the Destroyers have taken so far, Greg McKee, played last year in Philadelphia, was the backup there, so not a whole lot of opportunity. When he played, though, there's some positives to look at. He was 32-55, so 58.2% completion rate, 423 yards with 10 touchdowns and 3 picks, so a 99.47 rating. So not a bad run for him there. Again, this is a guy who looking at his season, the only real full games he would have gotten in Week 7 last year, he played Baltimore. He was 14-26, 164 yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 picks. And then in Week 8, played Washington, was 11 of 19 for 57%, 189 yards. That one was 4 touchdowns, 1 pick. So much better season there, or much better game in that one. But it'll be interesting to see where it goes from here, because we really don't know where things are going yet. It's one of the things that makes doing a show a little tricky as of yet, because until we see these teams play a game, we don't really know who's good yet. Now, we can look and say, Albany re-signed their quarterback. What is it, Tommy Grady? I always think it's funny because it sounds like it's like off-brand Tom Brady, but he's a great quarterback. So the expectation is, okay, Albany's going to have a great passing attack again. But if you've watched sports for any length of time, you know just because you take most of the same guys, put them back in the same spots, and line them up again, doesn't always mean they do things exactly the same way. So we'll see where that goes. And once we start getting closer to the season, folks, we're going to start having more discussions about where teams are at once we have full rosters in place, that sort of thing. The one other piece of news that came out today, and this just happened today, and it's interesting because I see the Destroyers trying to do something a little bit different. They announced plans today for a team mascot, and they're starting a search for the mascot. They're going to call her Captain Destroyer. And the interesting thing is they have made the decision organizationally that specifically Captain Destroyer is a woman. How this is going? The idea is that she's some kind of like a warrior or some kind of superhero character. I don't know how this is going to work, and it may. I mean, not questioning the issue that being a woman, that makes perfect sense to me. And the reason it makes sense is, especially with the changes since the last time I watched Thursday football years and years ago, as far as the Destroyers go anyway, there have obviously been some changes in how the world works, how we perceive issues and things like that. And my own personal story I'll share very quickly on why having a even if it is a mascot character, having a female feature prominently somewhere on game days. I watch a lot of hockey. And one night I was sitting at home watching hockey on TV, and my daughter, who at the time was I think about 4, looked up at me and said, "Daddy, do girls play hockey?" And I realized all the hockey I'd ever watched, all the events of hockey I'd ever taken her to were the Blue Jackets. So all she'd ever seen was men play hockey. Now, as an adult man, obviously I know that there's women's hockey in colleges, and there are a couple of professional women's leagues, that sort of thing. But to a 4-year-old child, that is not always obvious. They only know what they see. Now, when you're building an arena football team, I know that this week we had I think the news happened that the first ever woman was offered a football scholarship in something that wasn't kicking. I think there's a woman's offered a scholarship to a D2 school for like defensive back or something. Well, obviously there's not going to be this groundswell of talent that can play arena football. I mean, just because there hasn't been almost any women's talent developed in football, and all the realities of where we're at there. Same way with coaching. Most of the coaching that has happened as far as women has been some college ranks. They're starting to make some inroads at the pro levels. So getting female coaches is going to be, again, difficult in a way. Especially since to bring over somebody brand new from traditional outdoor 100-yard, 11-man-a-side football and try and say, okay, now you're going to coach a arena football team, they'd just be set up to fail. So that wouldn't be fair to anybody. But so I think the Destroyers looked at it and said, we want somewhere where we can have a woman there on game day representing the team and it work. And I'm excited about this idea. Now, if she walks out there and she's dressed like Wonder Woman, I don't know how excited I'll be, because playing up the fact that, oh, it's a woman and she has attractive qualities, I don't know if that's the way to go here. You want to, if the idea is to put something in there so that young girls and teenage girls are just, can see themselves represented in something, you don't want her to be a sex symbol. And I don't know what they're going to do. They may have, their plans could be 1,000 miles away from that. And I hope they are. I just don't know what this is going to be, because from what I understand with them saying they want her to be athletic and stuff, I don't think this is going to be somebody in a big costume like you have with like Stinger or whatnot. I think it's going to be something closer to, if you remember, the Charlotte Hornets for a long time had something, I think they called him Buzzman or something like that, where it was almost this kind of superhero character that ran around and did flips and did all sorts of crazy stuff. And so I don't know what they're going to be doing with this. But I'm excited for it. I hope it turns out well. But it's been a big week, and it's hopefully going to be a big week next week. So go Destroyers. Thanks for listening to the show, everybody. Again, we're kind of affiliated here with AFLFanZone.com, so do appreciate you checking them out. And follow us on Twitter at BStationPod. Thank you for listening to Battle Stations.